Jules Heningburg, wow. Welcome to the podcast, Connect with KT. It's a pleasure to have you on here today.
Thank you for having me on. I'm excited. Nice,
Uh,
nice Friday out here in San Diego.
yeah, so San Diego, you obviously are from the East Coast. You played lacrosse at Rutgers in state, like you never really ventured out. You get drafted by the old league down to Florida, and then the PLL starts and you suddenly move west. What was kind of in like the decision there?
Yeah, so I moved west because I got drafted by the San Diego Seals for the NLL. So I kind of was, after graduating from college, I was kind of figuring out what I wanted to do. And I knew that I wanted to move to a new city. I didn't want to be in New York City. I'm from New Jersey, but what happens is a lot of like when you graduate in New Jersey, like usually kids like move home or they move into New York City. So you kind of move home and then you figure out if you want to move to New York City or Hoboken. And I didn't want to do either of those things. So I knew I wanted to go somewhere else. So I was kind of banking on an NL team drafting me and then moving to that city and really trying to dive into box lacrosse. So luckily I was drafted by San Diego, and then that led me to come out west.
Yeah, and obviously I think around the same time probably I was moving out west as well for college, and I'd never really been outside of Maryland, so I can relate in that sense. Like, what do you think the biggest learning curve for you was getting to California? Because California is a different animal. It's not New Jersey, it's not Maryland. Like, it's very, very different. So what do you think the biggest thing was right when you got there? Like, was there any culture shock or anything like in that regard?
I don't think it was much of a culture shock. I think it was definitely just different. And it was cool though, because I was, like I said, I've been used to growing up on the East Coast. That's where I would go up and down for lacrosse and everything. I'd never been to California before. So when I got here, it was nice to see that there was something new out there and different than what I always had known. And I left the country before, but it's different traveling within your own state to see that people do things so differently. And going up and down the East Coast, you can kind of see it down south a little bit. But like I said, they do things differently than the East Coast in general. But when I got to the West Coast, I was like, wow, things are just more relaxed and people are enjoying life a little bit more. And they're not so pressed about work all the time. Whereas like in New York City, right, it's work. Like your life revolves around your job. Where I think people's jobs are connected to their lives more out here. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and you definitely are Cali Jules at this point. Like, I don't even think I can imagine you in New Jersey anymore. You're very laid back. That's kind of like you've adopted the Cali culture. So growing up in New Jersey, obviously family is a huge part of your life. You've spoken to me about your dad, your mom, how much both of them mean to you. And growing up playing lacrosse, playing basketball too, how important was family and like the support of your family when you were like trying to get to a competitive level in your sports as a kid?
You know, it's interesting because my family dynamic is so different, I think, than a lot of people. I had two adopted brothers come to my family when I was in third grade. So that was kind of interesting for me where, you know, I had been growing up having three siblings, older sister, younger sister, older brother. He's 25, turning 26 soon. We've always been 2 years apart. So when I was growing up, it was always kind of like my little sister doing her thing. My older sister was 7 years older than me. So she was kind of doing her own thing. And that was me and my brother were kind of playing sports together. And so we had my dad kind of focusing on us on the sports side of things. And we were super competitive, my brother and I. So we had a backyard that was a dirt backyard with a basketball hoop. And there was a bunch of roots on the ground, kind of like coming out from the tree right there. Funny, I talked to my dad about it. He told me he like intentionally put the basketball hoop there. But we would have like me and my brother just go back and forth all the time, one-on-one back there, like literally from 4 o'clock until like 12 o'clock at night. And my dad set up the lights out there. So for me, like having a brother like that was so competitive. And we both wanted to play in the NBA when we were growing up. That was our thing. Our dad played college basketball. We loved basketball. So we were like out there all the time hooping, like that ball is life. Yeah. And we were trying to, you know, get each other better. By doing that, it was just bringing out the competitive spirit. My dad always said, no blood, no foul. So like when we were out there, like we were throwing each other I was skinny, so I was getting thrown into the
yeah. You weren't throwing anybody into the ground.
No. So, but I had to figure out ways to be successful and beat my brother in the backyard. And so that was always a dynamic. And then my two older brothers came in, and then it was like, well, now I've got more older brothers around, seeing how they operate and kind of like just dealing with that. So then there's a bunch of kids in the house, and now you're navigating all these, you know, different relationships. And we lived in a small house. Like we didn't come from a lot of money, so our house was, you know, we fit, but it wasn't a huge where there was so much room. So we were always on top of each other. So it's now you're dealing with, you know, come dinner time, you're always on top of each other. Come when you're leaving the house to go to school, and the bathrooms are always on top of each other. So you're figuring out how to navigate and do all that stuff. So it was definitely interesting. And it was fun, though. I think it was a great experience for me, and it really helped me have perspective on life and allowed me to, I feel like, navigate a lot of the relationships I have today and understand different people's perspectives because of how I grew up.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing you mentioned was that you had to find ways to beat your brother because you were skinnier. And I think that's interesting because I can kind of see that in your play style, like in the PLL. Like you're not the biggest guy. You're not going to step down from like the restraining line. Like you find and you still rack up all the stats and all the goals, and like your teammates still respect you, and like you get the ball and like the offense runs through you. So like, I guess like what aspects of playing with your brother and like always being like, I guess the skinnier guy, the small, like not the smaller guy, but like, you know what I mean? Like what aspects of that have you carried with you still to this day in the PLL? And like, what would you tell someone who is a similar like size frame who thinks they can't like play a sport just because of that? Like what ways have you found to be successful like in regards to that?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because like when I look back on my experience, my dad, so I had my brother and we'd always compete and do things. And my dad would always say, if you could combine me and my brother together, we'd be like the perfect athletes. He was always like kind of stockier, bigger, and I was always super skinny, but we kind of had different traits that would make us successful on the field and on the basketball court. And I think playing with my brother in the backyard and always dealing with him and seeing how he was always beating me one-on-one, right? And then eventually it switched where I realized that I had enough skill and enough understanding of what I was doing with my size still to then beat him. And then it was like I could tell our competitions were changing because he was recognizing that I could beat him. And now he was like, all right, well, now how can I beat Jules? How can I hold him down? It was always like throw him into the dirt, foul him really hard. So it was like I was learning that, and then I was learning how to move and get away from him to touch me and like make sure he didn't get on me. Yeah. And then my dad would always he'd throw me into play with my brother when we were playing basketball and lacrosse. So starting in 5th grade, we had a summer camp that we go to called DeFeo's Lacrosse Camp. And I remember being in 5th grade, and I started playing in 2nd grade and started to pick the sport up a little bit. And by 4th grade, I remember being pretty good and like getting like a grip on it. 5th grade comes around, I go to this camp. You're playing with your own age group. You're playing with your own age group. The high school was on the other side. Eventually, they'd pull guys up. So in 5th grade, got pulled up to play with the varsity guys at that summer camp. So now I'm playing against the older kids. I've been playing against my brother who's 2 years and a big boy. So now it's like I'm going against these older kids who some of them, weren't even as big as my brother. And some of them, weren't as tough as him. So it was like, all right, well, I know how to deal with my brother and kind of get away and figure out how to do well. So then it was like I was doing well with them. And then I was always doing that playing up. And then it was kind of like I would get a little bit older and a little bit smarter, a little bit quicker, whatever. But I had the understanding of how to do things on the field to be successful. So then it was always it was making me that much better each year that I was growing, getting bigger, faster, stronger, whatever. And so 6th grade, I was playing up my brother's rec team. And then by 7th grade, now I was playing against, it wasn't just summer camp. We were in a league playing against the other varsity players. And now I'm a 6th grader, rising 7th grader, playing against kids who are 18. And it's like, I'm this small kid, but I'm still figuring out ways to be successful and help the team win. And then, I'm like the best player out there on our team because I've just been figuring it out. And then every single year that I get older, it was like I said, my body's maturing more, about my mind. I knew how to do things with the size that I had because my dad just threw me to the wolves. So I don't know. That's a unique experience. I don't know if everyone can get that, but I will say that playing pickup sports and playing in the backyard with older kids, letting them, like, essentially they're bullying you, but you're going to figure out how to, if you're a competitive person and you want something, you're going to figure, for me, it's like my brother, right? Your older brother. I want to beat him. I want to beat him. I'm tired of him beating me, going inside to talk to dad about it. Like, I'm going to figure it out. When you're a young kid, if you get put in that environment, like, you're going to figure it out. And then when you come back to play against your own age, it's like, it's night and day. And then as you're getting older, like I said, you get bigger, faster, stronger. You have all those experiences in your back pocket. And now everything's just added, extra bonuses, all the attributes you gain after that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's like also just huge for your like overall confidence in sports. Like if you're like going up against guys way older than you, like that's a no brainer. And for me, like it was kind of the same thing. Like I had 2 older brothers when I was a little kid, and they both played lacrosse, and like they both were good at basketball. So like those are my 2 sports. Like, and I would just get bodied in my driveway. Like I would lose, and I was always tall, but like I never had the size. So I wasn't really able to do much with it. But that kind of like that I think added to my physicality in the game. And like in women's, it's different. Like I drew a lot of charges. Like you can't just like wreck people to the ground. Like that's not a part of the game. But yeah, I mean, I think that experience, like playing with older siblings and just like older people in general, is like super, super huge. And I think honestly in our sport today, like you kind of lose that. Like people are instead like holding themselves back almost like by grades and by years just to like reclass and like play with younger guys and like try to look better because they're more grown, as opposed to like taking the challenge and getting better by playing against older guys. I think that's just like an interesting trend among high school sports. But so yeah, then so you get to high school, you've kind of realized that you're like pretty good at lacrosse, like this lacrosse thing is going to work out. You're at a public school, then you transfer to a private school, and then your recruiting process. So obviously you landed in state with Rutgers, but what, like, I mean, you have an underdog mentality about you, and like you've always been an underdog. So was it like the recruiting process where you first realized that like people were sleeping on you?
No, I think it really started when I was first started playing, because in my town, lacrosse was just a very popular sport. Us and Montclair were the first two programs to have a club. It was club before it was high school and sanctioned. And so we were the first town with Montclair to have a club lacrosse. So we had kind of the oldest, one of the oldest traditions and cultures. So when I started playing in second grade, there was a bunch of my dad's contemporaries from those older teams who had sons who were playing already and had been playing for 3 years.
Yeah.
So for me, when I started playing, I grew up on the other side of town where the kids that I was were playing lacrosse were on the other side of town. I didn't know they'd been playing for all these years. I was a basketball player. Weren't friends with any of them. I get into lacrosse, my first practice. I don't know what's going on. I don't know any of these kids. They're not my friends. And they're all, immediately obviously better than me. Yeah. So I'm like, all right, I'm fired up. And I'm like, if I start playing and realize I can catch the ball, I look in that left of me, that kid thinks he can cradle better than me. I'm like, all right, well, and that's where it started. And then, so from there, yeah, that kind of just kept going through, and I would play against other towns where, these kids were playing on club teams. Like we had like Trilogy, Leading Edge. All these kids would have all these helmets and all this stuff. I remember in rec, and I was never playing on those club teams because, my dad just didn't feel like it was important for me to play on those. Like I don't think we had the money. My dad was going to shell out $2,000 for the summer for sixth grade club lacrosse.
Yeah.
And these kids identified with these helmets and all these club teams that they were the good kids. Yeah. But I was just like random kid at Maplewood who was good, but I didn't play on those club teams because I wasn't good enough or whatever it was. So that was always like, I always had like a fuck you mentality about that, that these kids thought they're better because they're on these club teams or on this and that. And I was like, I'm just playing lacrosse because I love the game and basketball is really my main sport. And then in 8th grade, I realized I was like, all right, well, now if I want to get recruited and I really want to do this, like I have to commit to lacrosse. And I broke my wrist in basketball, which also like messed with my confidence. And that's a whole other story we can get into. But that's when I made the switch. And then I got to Columbia, and I had been playing, like I said, with all these guys since 5th grade that everyone knew that who I was as a player in the town. It's not like it was an unknown thing. It was like, who's that little kid that's out there playing and doing so well? And how is he better than all these guys? Yeah. And then when it came time to play on the varsity team, which I played that fall with all the varsity players, and I was like, it was me and my brother and this kid, Brett. So my brother, it was like me and my brother kind of knew I was a better player, but he didn't want to say it out loud. And then the other kid, Brett, he was Division I player. So he was always kind of better than me, kind of an older guy I looked up to be the better, like I want to be better than him. And so it was kind of us three and then everyone else. And we play in the fall, that 9th grade before the spring season. And I was doing what I know I could do on the field. And then come varsity tryouts, the coach says, oh, we don't let freshmen play varsity. That's a rule here. And I kind of had heard that before. And I was like, dude, just give me a tryout. If you don't think I'm good enough, like, I don't care. Like, at least give me the tryout so I can prove that I've been working all this time for this moment. Yeah. And he was like, no. So I remember that day, like, I was like crying the entire day. Like, I was crushed. And it was like everyone, like all my freshman friends knew this, like that I should have been playing varsity. They're like, why is Jules playing freshman with us? All this stuff. And from that moment, it's like, just keeps adding fuel to the fire. Cause I was like, this is just ridiculous. Come back sophomore year, play that varsity. I'm one of the best varsity for sophomores in the state. I was second on the team in points for our team. The kid Brett had more points. And then now I'm going into my junior summer getting recruited. But that sophomore year, I didn't going into sophomore year, I didn't play club lacrosse. Cause again, I played a little bit in 8th grade and I played in 9th grade, but it wasn't to get recruited. It was a 2-for-1 deal I did with my brother on a team just to play.
Yeah.
And so I was playing up again. My dad always wanted us to play together. And all these kids are just that sophomore year before, like during, sitting down in class, these kids are all committing to these schools. And I'm like, I don't even know, like, I didn't even know to get recruited yet. Like,
Yeah.
because I wasn't in that clique to know, like, this is what you need to do. And because it wasn't, people weren't on, like, talking about openly, okay, this is a date to get recruited September 1st, like they are now, how to do all this. It was just a free for all.
Yeah.
So then I go into that rising junior summer after that sophomore year. At that point, I'm going to transfer because I was fed up with that coach, and I was not going to keep doing, like, giving all of that program and that coach when they frankly didn't give a shit about me. My friends didn't care enough about the game. Like, I cared a lot about it.
Yeah.
And that was fine. There was no blood with that, with the players. There was blood with the coach. But I was like, I'm not going to stay with this coach. That's like pretty much, he's cursing me out, talking shit to me during games, all this stuff. And I was like, looking back on it, I'm a coach. I would never, ever do that to a kid, like berate a kid and speak negatively like that to them. So even looking back on it, it's insane. So I'm glad I recognized that as a young kid. And I would tell my dad kind of and be like, I don't think this is right. But so then fast forward that summer, now I'm playing club lacrosse to get recruited for Leading Edge. And I'm going, and the only schools, they're not, like, I wasn't the type of recruit where just my style wasn't like a dominant force physically, a dominant force all over the field. It was like I was good at a bunch of different things and kind of how I am now, move around the field and do a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And so coaches weren't going to drop their recruits that they had from last summer for me. Like, UNC wasn't going to drop, like, that was my dream school, UNC. They weren't going to drop me for, whoever they had. So then it was like the schools that recruited me saw something in me. Kind of once they started talking to me, understood how I was as a player. And then that was kind of how it came down to Navy and Rutgers, where Navy was free, full tuition if you go there. And then Rutgers was in-state, half scholarship. And then he was selling me on the changing the school and the culture and all this stuff, Coach Breck, which is something I as a player, I was always taking stuff really personally. So when I was hearing that stuff, like, I was like telling my dad this, and I was telling like my family, like my brother, like, this is what I'm going to do. Like, I'm going to go to Rutgers and I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of like how it was in my head. So that's kind of how it ended up. And that, even going to Rutgers, like, I had the mentality that no one else in the state was committing there. Like, I'm going to be the guy that goes there and does this. So that's kind of how that recruiting process ended up me landing on Rutgers, and how that mentality was kind of being developed.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting with your story how you just have like an extreme like bounce back mentality. Like, it's like you always just like make the best of like the situation that you're in. Like you mentioned all the way back to second grade, like you like were not as good as the other kids, but then you just like look around and you're like, oh, they think they can like dodge on, like, okay, bet. Like, it's just like, okay, bet. Like, I'll like, and that goes all the way up to recruiting. So you get to Rutgers, you start changing the culture. I feel like there was always, like you mentioned, like the hype train and the helmets around the other kids, and like Rutgers is not that program. Like, I feel like the Rutgers program and what you made of it aligns very much with like who you are and like what you wear on your sleeve and what you represent. So what when did the Rutgers like hype train kind of start? Like, when did you guys start getting good and like people around really around the nation started noticing like Jules Heningburg?
So freshman year came in, I was like, had all these aspirations. When I got there, I was like, oh my God, I got punched in the face with what's going on at school.
Yep.
I'd be calling my dad like each week, just being like, dude, this is what's going on. This is what's going on. This is what's going on. Like, I'm trying to navigate it all. It's a lot. I got this stuff going on with my teammates. I got, culture here. I got all this. And then the last thing I was worried about is how am I actually playing on game day? So once I had that experience, I was second on the team in points freshman year. I did not play well. It was not confident about how I did. I still did manage to do well relatively. Took that experience to sophomore that summer, and I was like, all right, I'm coming back, and I know what I was very good at seeing what I did well and what I didn't do well, and could say, all right, if I can now do that part well, this will take my game to this level.
Yeah.
So I took those experiences that I had. I saw on the field what I was doing, what was helping me. I saw on the field what I needed to do to help myself. And then I said, I'm going to attack this that summer, and I'm going to come back a better player, the player I know I could be coming out of high school that I knew I was on the trajectory before I got really hit in the face that freshman year. And I'm going to change that about myself. And if other guys, in the program aren't on the same wavelength with me, I'm going to kill it my sophomore year. I'm getting out of there.
Yeah.
I come back sophomore year in the fall, and Scott Bita was my senior year, the captain. I was a sophomore, and I could tell that he was on the same wavelength that I was. And he knew that he didn't want to leave Rutgers that way, that we same bad taste in his mouth, that he wanted to leave a legacy. He was very similar to me. We just didn't connect like that freshman year because just whatever reason, maybe I wasn't mature enough, he wasn't mature enough, whatever it was. Once we realized that we were on the same wavelength, we were like, all right, we got something here. We know that we can do this and play at this high level. Now we got our buddy Adam, and now we got a bunch of different specs around the program, like guys that were just doing it, and seeing that we were building this chemistry and something was going. We called like brewing on the banks.
Yeah.
When we started our sophomore year, after we had a couple scrimmages, we saw what we could do. We saw us players, and then we hit that sophomore year at 5-0 to start the season. And we were like, yep, we knew that we had this. We were going. And then no one could really see that. We weren't playing the best competition, whatever. We lose 2 games in a row. And then now we're 5-2. Now we're kind of going to Big Ten play. And all of a sudden we're in Big Ten play and the national spotlight's on us. No one really knows who we are. We know what we have. We lose these 2 games in a row, but we knew we can bounce back and fix a couple of things. And then we beat Hopkins. And then we beat Penn State. And then we go to, we beat Michigan. We had a bunch of wins. And all of a sudden everyone's like, who is Rutgers? And we're just like,
and you're like, you're like, we've been here. Like and that's the best. Like, there's no shock to you guys. Like, you're like this, we knew this all along. Like,
yeah, I remember distinctly we beat Penn State at 16-15. And I was like, I had that goal and stuff. And we had knocked out the goalie stick. And that was a senior night. And that was the first time there's like a cup we played versus Penn State. And I remember the interview guy after, he was like, I had like 6 goals, 2 assists. And he was like, you just did this on the national stage versus, top level competition. Like, you guys really want some of the best guys in the country. And I was like, yeah, dude, like when you go out there and play versus these teams, like, and you do well, like that's what it is. And I knew what I did last year, how I did versus those teams and what I needed to fix. And it's like a simple for me to like kind of just translate into now I'm going on the field and you just play at the level you can play, where everyone else is like so shocked about it. And it's like me and our friend group and not the guys on our team that were doing it, weren't shocked. We were like, this is what you get for working hard and fixing what you need to fix. And playing at a high level. So that was kind of when that sophomore year when I really came onto the team a little bit, and then things kind of started to kind of go up there. And I quickly, right when I recognized that there was a difference in the program, I was like, there's no reason to transfer. Like, this is everything I need in a program.
Yeah, and I think one thing that stands out to me about you always has is like the way you invest in relationships, like with anybody, like with teammates, with coaches, with friends, with like your family, with like everybody. And so I want to touch on that a little bit with the upperclassmen and the people that you mentioned on the team when you kind of started that, to see that they were on your same wavelength. But first, I want to dive in because you said that you got there as a freshman, you got smacked in the face. And I know that you apply a lot of the lessons you've learned into your coaching. And shameless plug here, you started Mission Prime, which is it was going to be a set of camps for the summer, and now you've gone virtual. But the whole focus is getting kids ready for their freshman year out of high school so that they don't have to have the smack in the face. So what aspects so obviously it's rising freshmen in college, and what aspects of that smack in the face do you think that you will, because it happens to everyone, like it happened to me, like it's like you don't know what you're even preparing for. Like it's not like it's a lack of preparation, like there are just so many factors in college. So like what parts of your experience are you bringing into that this summer for the rising freshmen?
Definitely. I think for me, I had that experience as a freshman, and my coach would always talk about it when I would tell him how upset I was about that experience. And I was like, Coach, listen, you recruited me to come here to change the program, change the culture, and bring Rutgers to a place it's not been in a very long time. This is what's going on. And if, frankly, the way that we were treated as freshmen and the way that things were done, like I didn't like, and I know that he would always tell me like, well, take what you experienced and make sure that doesn't happen to the freshmen and change what you wanted. So then I, as a sophomore, was like, I would consciously have conversations with our sophomores and be like, guys, like, you realize what would happen to us? Let's take these underclassmen and deliver them an experience that will help them and let them adjust quicker and be a part of the team quicker and help them so that they could help us on game day. Yeah. And when I started to think about it like that, and that was kind of that's just a leadership thing. When I always saw, if I had something to give and I knew that it was right, I was going to make sure that guy had it, because I knew that would inevitably help me and help the team, which is our goal, is to win and help the team. And so I just kind of started to consciously do it. And by senior year, like I just had a full grip on everything that those kids were going through. So like I had a guy, Ryan Gallagher, come in, and right away, like it's hard when you're on a team, because I have to worry about not only myself and performing on game day, as a captain, the relationship with my coach and the teammates and making sure that their messages are getting delivered, worrying about the entire team. Then it's like now I'm worrying about specific players and making sure that they're have everything they need to be successful and confident in themselves so that they can perform on game day. So a guy like Ryan Gallagher, who came in, or Tommy Coyne, right? I knew what they were going through and what was happening. I was making sure I was doing on a consistent basis every day to set them up so that they were dealing with as least amount of toxicity that they could deal with. And to a certain extent, you need experience to grow, and that they were going to get that, but they were going to have tools in their toolbox to help them grow through those experiences quicker and more effectively and efficiently.
Yeah.
So when I recognized I could do that and deliver that to those guys, and it was just a consistent thing over and over, because I'd see where they were lacking. I'd talk to them about it, have conversations. It's like, all right, I need this guy to be everything to be dialed in for him so that come game day, the only thing he's worried about is executing his role. And by him not, the only thing that's going to prevent him from executing his role is if he's not good enough with a certain skill set in that scenario.
Yeah.
And that's what I just wanted to leave. I wanted to leave that to be the only thing that those kids had to worry about.
Yeah, like remove all other, like, yeah.
That exactly. Remove everything else so that this kid can be dialed in, because at Rutgers, I needed them. Like, we didn't have these recruits coming in that would just take kids' spots and push them to the back door.
Yeah.
So I needed them. So I knew that, and I could see where they are having these difficulties. And so I was always going out of my way to make sure that they were not having them. And that was kind of like how we were successful at Rutgers, because we took care of each other and were, like I said, doing all those things. So flash forward to now as a pro, and I start to have conversations with other guys about other teams. Like, that's such a unique experience, and that I was able to navigate that and help those guys and figure all that stuff out, because I had to figure it out to help Rutgers. That now I'm like, well, all these other kids they're going into these programs, especially like the big time programs, where there's just going to be another guy under them that comes in and takes their spot if they're not figuring it out.
Yep.
Where that wasn't happening, right? So that now it's like, let's give those tools to these kids so that they don't start to drown and lose that passion that they have as recruits, that we all have, after your freshman spring, when you don't play because shit's all hitting the fan. You go home that summer, you're like, all right, whatever, it's done. College is over. I don't really care anymore.
Yeah.
And then you come back that fall, there's a new freshman that comes in that just has it figured out a little bit more than you, has more talent, whatever it is, and he's just kicking you to the curb. And now you're just a part of the team. You don't care that much, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how that's really come to be.
Yeah. I mean, I think, like I touched on, like, the relationships, and like you're building relationships with those kids. You're teaching kids how to build relationships with upperclassmen and kind of like remove that gap. So obviously you were the sophomore on Rutgers, and then you were the senior, the leader, and you leave Rutgers and then you enter the pro lacrosse scene, which is a whole different beast from college. It's like, it's a different locker room dynamic. So who have been some of your mentors and like people that you've cultivated relationships with in the PLL and I guess in the NLL, but like the PLL players that you look to kind of help you? I mean, it could be on the Redwoods or it could be anybody, but who's kind of helped you lay that blueprint out for yourself?
Definitely. I think my experience, I played in the other league, and I had some guys on that team. Stephen Brooks, one of them, who you never know when you get to the pro ranks, like if what you're doing is right and if you're doing the right things. I kind of always had a sense that I was doing the right things in terms of taking care of my body, being able to show up and do a job. All these things I did at Rutgers consistently every week and at a high level, and in my opinion, very high level competition in the Big Ten. Like, shit was just very serious every week. And when I got to the pros, it was like, okay, you're going to do this, but then how are you going to do it after, you don't have the locker room setting that you do in college, where someone's looking after you, you got a coach telling you to do it, yada, yada, yada. I was always doing it on my own anyway.
Yeah.
So then it was like, I was looking at them in terms of just more of, the confidence that I could do it and consistently, and would look to get the tips about, how to deal with being on the road and, not practicing and how to have your stick dialed and all these things, kind of just more regimented ways to be successful come game day without that college experience. Yeah. And I think Stephen Brooks was great with that. I played on tack line with Dylan Malloy and Kieran McCardle, and I thought those guys I learned a lot from, and how to, fit in with superstars in the pro game. And kind of, Tucker Durkin was on that team too. He was a great leader. And then, fast forward, I played for NLL, and I had all these guys. I had no idea who so many of these NLL guys were, just because, like, as an American, you just, sometimes you're not privy to the NLL game, the outdoor game. I mean, the indoor game, excuse me. And there was one guy in particular that, Dan Dawson, who I kind of latched onto. He was on my end. He was a forward, and he kind of got picked up on the Seals for like a 1-year deal, and he was like one of the older vets. And in my head, I didn't really know what that meant. And like, is he kind of coming in to just talk and be a part of the team? Is he being to be the best player? Whatever. He's a Hall of Fame player. So he gets on the team. I started talking to him. I remember I was texting with my one of my coaches, longtime coaches, mentors, Brian Silcott, and I was like, Dan Dawson's so good. He's like, Dan Dawson is who you need to latch onto. Figure out how to help Dan and figure out how to talk to Dan because he will help you be successful. So obviously I'm like, okay. And I start talking a little bit more and I'm like, okay, Dan gets it. He knows what's going on. He's been doing this for 20 years and he's the man. I need to figure out what makes him tick and why he does it, what he does, et cetera, everything. So he was a huge influence on me last year. And then fast forward to the PLL, and we had other guys on our team, but he was just kind of on the offensive end, the older guy that I was like, one day when I grow up, I want to be like Dan Dawson.
Yeah.
And then fast forward to the PLL, obviously on the Whip Snakes, we have a bunch of guys there, Maryland guys, who I felt like in my college experience that they were doing the same things that I was doing and that I was expecting other players to do. They just kind of had more talent. So then when I got on their team, it was like, all right, I was right. They do this shit at a high level. They hold a standard, but they're also really talented. So it was awesome to be a part of that and to kind of see how those guys operated. And then fast forward to get traded to the Redwoods. And then it's like, now I'm playing with Matt Cavanaugh, who a player that I looked up to when I was in high school. And then I have Greg Renly and Kyle Joe, all these guys that, legends in the game, vets in the game that now they're on my team. So I'm in their ear every week and talking to them and learning from them and taking different parts because leadership's so different where guys, they lead in so many different ways. A great example, fresh in everyone's mind watching the Jordan documentary, you have a guy like Michael Jordan who leads in his way because he can and he has to, and that's his role in that organization. And then you have guys that kind of pick you up like Scottie Pippen when, just that push-pull a little bit. So it's interesting. You see those guys and how that works and start to learn and pull from different things and how to be successful. So that's kind of just taking, something Mark Lassini always says, like success leaves clues, just taking from those people that are successful, taking it into yourself and putting a little spin on it based on your personality, based on your qualities. And then now you start to again, deliver those things to the younger players that come in on your team. That's kind of how the leadership level goes.
Yeah, so you mentioned the trade. Obviously, you're on the Whip Snakes to start the year, and then you get so basically, like the PLL was like a new league, so everybody was fighting for a spot week one because it's like you're the first time you're ever playing with that team. It's not like anybody really was like protected in that sense. So you fight and you claw and you find your way with the Whip Snakes, and then week 4 comes around, and before the Baltimore rounds, which were electric, you get traded to the Redwoods, and so you had to do that again. You had to infiltrate again. And you just literally go out on Homewood Field, which is the staple of like blue blood, like fucking like old style, like 1900s lacrosse, like, and you're just this kid from Maplewood and you just go out on Homewood Field, the most historic field, in front of all those fans and just dominate this league of the world's best. And I think that honestly was your like coming out party, like with the PLL. People were like, oh my God, like he's here. Like it's like, this is like his, I mean, it's not his team, but like he's here to stay. So what was the mindset like going into that game with a brand new team? Like you didn't really know what it was going to be like. So how did you get ready for just like an unknown in that game? And how did you end up just like completely dominating?
So I think it kind of just dates back to what I was talking about, where I was always really good at seeing what I could do, seeing what made me successful. And so it started at a very young age with like I said, in the backyard with my brother and how to figure things out. And then seeing where I needed to improve to take my game to another level. And a lot of the times when you're at the highest level in a sport, whether that's, at one point it was college lacrosse for us and now it's the pro level, the difference between being good and great is really a razor thin line, right? If you're a player that, you can get your hands free anytime you want and you're shooting it at 20% clip, but you take that to a 30% clip, all of a sudden you're now in talks to being one of the best players, right?
Yeah.
If you get consistently open all the time, you're shooting at 30%, right? But 20% you're not, right? You're a guy that can get his hands free, can't do much, right? So for me, I always saw those little things and I was like, okay, how can I just get it up to this level? So when I got traded, right, I knew what I was bringing to the table. It was just a matter of figuring it out, right? In terms of on the Whip Snakes, we had Rambo, we had Drenner, we had Reed, we had all these attackmen moving in and out of the lineup. I'm going through the box. I was traveling from the West Coast to the East Coast a bunch. my legs weren't there to start, and they weren't really there like the way that I wanted them to be and knew in terms of the conditioning I had. And I talked to Coach Staggs about it. He was like, start flying in a little bit earlier. And this is like the third game. That week, I flew in to Baltimore the day before and stayed with Drenner because I knew I needed to have my legs underneath me, because that was just what an adjustment I was making. And this is a pro level adjustment that you have to make. And so I flew in. And so when I started playing on that game day in Baltimore, I was like, my legs are here. They're not there. Yeah. And I was like, well, now I just have more opportunity with the ball in my stick. I already have all the skills. Coach is empowering me to go out and do a job, because that's what he traded me for. So now it all just kind of comes together, and you're in the moment and you do your job, and that's what happens.
Yeah.
And it's kind of just seeing, like I said, seeing what you need to do to be successful, or seeing what you do that makes you successful, where you can improve, and then just making those adjustments, and then you execute. And that's what I've always just been really good at.
Yeah, and I think like the Redwoods like always made me laugh, because you guys were always just like cracking each other up, and like it was like a brotherhood almost, like right from the jump. And I guess just I mean, it was like the whole Cloutwoods thing, and then like it was just you guys were just like always cracking everybody up, and it was that camaraderie from day one. And I think it's cool how like it was a mix of like the older players who are more established and like the goats of our game, like you said, like Greg, Joe, Kyle. And then it's like the younger guys like you, Ryder, Cav. Like it was just like a match made in heaven. So you go throughout the season and you guys are vibing, like you have like a bunch of great games, and then that game comes along. Correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was Denver where you guys got blown out by the Whips.
I think it's Hamilton.
Okay, yeah. So Hamilton, you guys get blown out by the Whips like a couple weeks before the playoffs, and then all of a sudden it's like fast forward and you're playing the Whip Snakes in the championship, and that game, the championship game, was like electric for so many reasons. It was like the culmination of the whole season. Like I thought it was like the teams who deserved to be there the most. So would you say that was the biggest stage you've ever played on?
Yeah, definitely. I think it was the biggest stage I'd played on prior to that was Big Ten championships and Big Ten playoffs my sophomore year.
Yeah.
And for me, it was a unique experience, because it was, you know, a lot of guys had played on these programs that had gone to the NCAAs and got a championship weekend. And I just was not fortunate enough to be on a team that could put that together and get to that point. And so it was definitely unique. And I think I look at it as another opportunity, right, where I saw what happened and I felt it. And now it's okay. Now when I go back and I can play for the rest of my career now at the level I know I can play at, and obviously you adjust as you get older, but now I have that experience to then the next time I go, okay, I felt this before. I know what this takes. I know what I know what the competition level is when it comes time. I know how these games go, and you could just kind of build on that experience.
Yeah, because I know that you're very serious about the game. You love the game. Like you're passionate about the game. And so seeing you obviously as your friend after that game was tough. And like, I remember the conversations we had in the coming weeks, but I remember I just kept telling, because I didn't know what else to fucking say. I was like, I just kept telling you like, you'll be good. Like next year. And I think it's cool how you mentioned, like you just took that experience, and it's just like another thing that you add to your like I guess your little toolbox, because you've obviously played on like so many different teams, like so many different team dynamics, and it's just cool that like obviously if you had won, that would have been an ideal situation, but now you have the loss, and like that locker room is like united as ever, and like that will just fuel the 2020 championship series run. So going into that, obviously that's going to be unique. July 25th. Everybody from the PLL going to what they're dubbing PLL Island. So obviously that's a very different challenge, and it's not a season. It's not even really like it's not really playoffs. Like it's nothing you've ever really seen before. It's kind of like a World Cup vibe. So what are you most looking forward to about that? I mean, you mentioned like you get your body right, you get your head right all the time. So it's going to be difficult with 3 weeks of just nonstop lacrosse. So like what adjustments are you making, like if any, to like your sleep schedule, your diet, like anything really to like simulate and kind of prepare for what that's going to be like?
Definitely. I think for me, there's a lot of things I am very particular about with what I eat and how I train and things. And for me now, it's how can I take that up a level, because this is an experience where we're going to have to be able to, prevent injury, consistently play at a high level. When the fourth quarter comes around on day 5 or 6, you still need to be able to have gas in your tank. So what am I doing now, to prepare for that? I'm changing my training regimen to fit that schedule, right? Before we're looking at a, 2 or 3 month season. Now it's condensed, but we're still playing a lot of games. So it's a lot of miles in your body in a short amount of time. Yeah. How are you gonna be able to fuel your body? So I'm starting to look at fuel a little bit differently right now. and what I'm taking in, how much energy it gives me. I'm starting to look at hydration is always there, a consistent thing with me. But I'm looking at my training regimen differently. I got a new program for my strength coach, and I'm really just trying to the biggest thing, prevent injury, because if you're going to go out there and put all those miles at the highest level, where, for us, the level just keeps increasing, and no one understands totally what that level is till we go out there. Like, I think they jump from 2 pro seasons ago to last pro season it's through the roof, because everyone's taking it so much more serious.
Oh, it was insane. It was crazy.
Add another layer to that, because we're a year older, the stakes are higher, the season's shorter. So now that's going to jump up.
There's another team.
Exactly. So now you're going to have to think about that in terms of like how hard you're going to be playing when you do play. So you have to be able to kind of prepare and adjust and keep growing as a player in the pro game. And to keep up with, frankly, the younger players that are coming in are hungrier too, and they're fresher, right? So then you got to keep up with that. So there's a lot of just competition you got to keep up with and keep preparing mentally and physically to level up your game.
Yeah. So you obviously are all about improvement, like self-improvement. That's like, I feel like when I first met you and like started being around you, like the first thing I realized was like, oh, this dude like has his shit together. Like I was like, he knows what he knows what's up. So I guess the pillars that like you talk about with me and just like what you bring into your life, like you live by like a little bit of a regimen, and like it's the way you eat, it's the way you think, like it's the way you plan your day, it's the way you reflect on your day, like it's the way you work out, like everything. So what would you say like the pillars of Jules Heningburg are, and like what I guess what could you offer up for like a young athlete who maybe is like a little misguided on their journey and like they just want to simplify things a little bit? Like what would you say to them?
Here I actually the pillars for me are really the pillars of Mission Primed, and that's kind of the unique part about it, is like these are things that I've gone to live by, and pillars and principles that I've gone to live by, and it's interesting because when you're younger, you think about it like so all over the place, but the older you get, things just start to fall in line, and it's just the quicker that you can create things kind of to just happen without you thinking too much about it, is the easier it gets. Like when you talk to someone about all this stuff, and it's just a lot to consume at once. But if I can tell you, you'll have, for example, routines. You'll have 4 of these routines done by the time you wake up.
Yeah.
Right. So like, I'll go over all of them, but just talking about routines, first thing, getting 8 hours of sleep every night, right? People that don't sleep enough, you're automatically putting yourself at a huge disadvantage. If you talk to there's so many people you can talk to about this, but LeBron James says it all the time. The biggest thing I can tell you about training is you need to sleep. And his trainer talks about that like I said, all the time, sleeping and drinking water. So if you can get to bed on time and wake up in the morning and get to sleep, right, that's already one thing done. Put your phone down before you go to bed so that you can fall asleep. That's 2 things done. When you wake up in the morning, right, drink some water. That's getting the water started. That's 3 things done, right? The 4th thing, now you're kind of getting your day started, right? When are you going to work out? Right? Every day, some form of physical exercise. For us as athletes, it's easier because we understand that we need to be regimented about our workouts to improve and set ourselves up for a season. Someone that's, might not recognize how important that physical exercise is. If they can start to recognize that, that's 4 things done already right there, right? So when you can start thinking about how to check all those boxes off like without consciously doing them, that's when you really start to roll.
Well, I think also the interesting thing there with you is like, I remember I would talk to you before some of these huge games last year, like, and you would just have such a calm demeanor, and I would ask you like, are you nervous? Like, what's the deal? Like, I remember it felt like it was like the biggest thing in the world, and you would just be like, no, because, and I would talk to you the weeks before, and you would just be like, no, because like I know that like what I've done works, and like I've set myself up so that when I get to the game, I can just literally play lacrosse. Like you basically were like, all the factors I've already taken care of. Like I flew in early, like I'm getting my water, I'm getting my sleep, like I worked out this week, like I ate healthy, like, and I think that is huge for like game day confidence, is like, you're like, I'm going to play the best that I possibly can because all the other factors are gone. Like I'm going, as long as I know the offense, like I'm going to play lacrosse. Like and when you simplify it like that, that I feel like is what makes it so easy for you. And like, that's how you take away the pressure. Like you don't get wrapped up in the moment. Like every time you step on the field, it's a lacrosse game. Like,
yeah. And I think, so I'll go through them real quick and then I'll touch on that. So we have routines, executing intentional daily habits, relationships, nourishing every connection, sacrifices, you got to give to gain, mental thought management, which is a big part of what you were just saying, and I'll touch on that. Physical condition, maintain and respect the body, spiritual, identify the why, family, support your system, and lacrosse, really honoring the medicine game. So when I talk about that preparation that you're talking about, right, all of that leads up to the game. And kind of the last part about that is just the thought management part, which is like when you are playing the game, how you're just falling back into your skills that you have and that you prepared to be in that moment for, right? So you can prepare yourself as much as possible, but if you're playing in a game, and everything's running through your head all crazy all over the place, you're focused on the last play, you're focused on the score, you're focusing on getting points, you're focusing on beating your matchup, right? Instead of just focusing on being in the moment and letting those skills go on autopilot, right? So then you do everything you need to do, preparing for that game the right way, you're confident in that, and then your skills are on autopilot. Well, the rest is up to chance, right? It's up to, okay, is this guy in front of me having a better day than me, right? Is this guy just a better player than me?
Yeah.
Is that goalie hot today, right? But if you can kind of set yourself up and then be in the moment and play with those skills on autopilot, and that you're already at a high level, more than likely, every time you go on the field, just how statistics work, you're going to produce at a high level to help your team. So it's like, that's kind of how it all works. And, all those pillars and principles relate to setting yourself up to do that. And it's just like I said before, I've started to cultivate a way of thinking about it and kind of trying to, you as my friend, for example, when we talk, I try to talk you through them in this way. So that's like consumable. It's you understand it, and no one's going to get it all at the same time or right away, because it's just how it goes. We're all on our own path. But if you can just start to kind of check off more boxes and unconsciously do them, like I said, start recognizing that you want to, and this is, for example, relationships. Perfect time to invest more into relationships was quarantine, and you will still have the time to do it. Once you see that you actively do that and what it does for you, and the ones that you actually care about, you continue to invest in and just like build, nourish, right? The ones that you don't, you quickly realize that you don't want to invest in them because they're not helping you, they're not healthy, so you push them away. And then you'll start to see how investing into those relationships helps you as a person, it helps them as a person, and we're all together. And then all of a sudden, you care about relationships now. And now every time, right, when you're talking to someone, you're constantly thinking about, how is this relationship how do we help each other? How do we bring each other up? What is the positive that we're getting out of this? If there's nothing there, that's perfectly fine. We can move on. Right. And then it's starting to find ways that you can kind of check those boxes off and consciously just, unconsciously, care about them.
Yeah. And I think it goes, even beyond lacrosse. Like for me, obviously I left the team, and I feel like I got more out of what you've been preaching once I left than like when I was even on the team, just because like it's more of like a lifestyle, and like the whole relationships thing. Like we talk a lot about that. Like you've helped me and like mentored me and like helped me to like see what really people are about.
It's just like, and that's just how it goes. Like some people's intentions are not what, might not have been what you thought. They may have changed.
Yeah.
Right. They may be at a different point in their lives. There's so many different factors.
Yeah. It's
important to have that self-awareness about your relationships, as opposed to what I call, a lot of folks are just on autopilot about their whole lives.
Yeah.
Whoever I met at high school, and that's my best friend, and that's my best friend.
Yeah.
Whoever was on my team, like that's my teammate, that's my best friend, whatever. There's so many relationships that you're on autopilot about. Even your family. Think about how many siblings you have. When you're growing up in the house and mom and dad are there, right? You're always take from mom and dad, and you're always just thinking that you're around your siblings, so these are my siblings.
Yeah.
When you graduate college, mom and dad aren't there. It's not take from mom and dad. It's I'm calling mom and dad and checking up on them, and I'm flying back home to go to the holidays and do this stuff. I'm calling my siblings and checking in on them to see how they're doing and building that adult relationship now. But it's a conscious investment that you have to do. And once you start to do it consciously, you'll naturally, it becomes a habit. You'll naturally always recognize what the relationships you want to keep nourishing and the ones that are not helping, because we don't have enough time in our lives to be dealing with toxic relationships, right? Some things that aren't uplifting us and bettering each other as people.
Yeah. And that's definitely, and I think also like you can start to see once you start really investing in your relationships and like thinking about it more, like you can actually start to analyze like how strong the ones that you've nurtured are, as opposed to the autopilot relationships. Like you're like, oh damn. Like, but anyway, so obviously this plan is great, and like it's helped you, it's helped me. Like it's just like a way to live, but adversity always strikes. And I think that's the interesting part, like how you respond to certain things in your life that may happen to you. Like I saw it firsthand this past summer with the concussion during the third quarter, I guess you could say, of the PLL season, and how you responded to that. So at what point, like when you can't work out because you have a head injury, or you can't talk to your family because you can't be on your phone, or whatever it is, like how do you adjust and like keep the overarching end goal in mind during a time like that? Because it's hard. Like it's the PLL is a league where if you're not playing, somebody's going to be playing. Like someone needs to be in that spot, and if they go off, like you're done. Like it's a scary thing, and you had the concussion. So I just want to know like how you kept yourself focused on being Jules Heningburg, being present, being where your feet are during that injury for you this past season.
So I think for me, that injury was actually like a huge turning point for my career and how I was thinking about things, because I'd been through this journey and I had always been able to, be successful in the places that I've gone.
Yep.
And you're on this, like I said, you're on this journey and you continue to learn and grow. And I think getting that concussion allowed me to take a step back and recognize why I was playing the sport, what my intentions were, and take a look at in some things inside of me that now has transitioned me to be in a place where everything you just said are uncontrollables.
Yep.
So and this is something I have difficulty with growing up, is I'd always hear folks say stuff, but they never really knew how to dive into it and talk about why it was important to me and how I can apply it, strategy, consistently executing what happens when this happens. So I was always under the impression that I wanted to find out more, and I was curious because I wanted to grasp the entire concept of just how my brain works. So a great, something coaches would always say, control what you can control. What the fuck does that mean, coach?
Yeah.
Okay. How can I control, right, when my mind is running and thinking about the things I can't control? How do I bring that back?
Yeah.
Right. So something that I've started to dive into, and Phil Jackson talks about a lot, is like the mindfulness side of things, where it's just you're starting to create and cultivate thought management and really care about what you're thinking in your head, how that's affecting you, how it's not affecting you. And it took me to have that concussion to really dive into that, because it's a traumatic experience for your brain, and it can rattle your brain pan, and you start to question things and start to, things might not be clicking the same way. And it's a really uneasy feeling and scary feeling, frankly. And anyone with concussion that's had serious ones can attest to that. And because of that, it allowed me to, like I said, to take a deep look at things. And now, right, when I talk about, maybe, for example, if I got a concussion, right, when anything adversity for me strikes, and I've always been able to overcome it. But now the way that I overcome it is a little bit different, where I take a step back and I get in the present moment. And this is a practice that you have to cultivate, a conscious thing. It's like anything else. It's like working out, right? You can't just magically wish yourself to be more present. You have to consciously be present each day. And then over time, you can pull yourself back to being present. When I say present, right, you're not thinking about the future, because the future doesn't exist. You're not thinking about the past because it's over with. And again, it's not a real thing. It's only in our heads are we creating it to be a real thing. Yeah. Right. The only thing that is real, right, is the present moment. And everything else is you just creating these thoughts about things that either haven't happened yet, happened before, people's perceptions, whatever, that you can't control. So instead, if you can bring that focus back to the present moment, right, then you can actively focus on bettering yourself to cultivate that future that you want. Yep. Right. So if you have a concussion, right, or an injury, right, and you're worried about all that stuff, you're just taking away from the rehab and the prehab and the strengthening of that injury that you're trying to do to get you back to that point. Yeah. And if you do all those things every single day, right, not only is it gonna build a sense of like accountability and that preparation and that confidence to when you are back, right, you're going to get more out of it. And then when you do get back, right, if it's not there and you didn't get it, right, then it just wasn't meant to be. Yeah. Right. And you pivot and you move away from that.
Dude, I could not agree more.
And that's only thing you can control. And while doing all that, right, you are then gaining experience that is going to set you up for what that next pivot that you do once you hit that point. Yeah. But folks, and I fell into this trap a lot of the time was, I'd always be in college. I was always worried about the NCAA tournament, and I was always worried about the committee, and I was always worried about, is Rutgers going to get in? By senior year, like, I knew how this went. If I lost this game versus Army versus Princeton, that they were going to count this loss against me if I didn't win the Big Ten championship, and they were going to kick me out of the tournament, keep me out. Yeah. if I was putting that energy that I was thinking in my head and it was filling space in my head into, instead of that, training more deliberately and focusing on that training and focusing on those relationships in the moment and focusing on being a better leader and all these things, maybe, right? And I don't live with regret, but it's just an understanding of my past. Maybe I would have positioned our team and positioned other players better so that we wouldn't have lost that game.
Yeah.
But instead I was focused on what I couldn't control, and it takes away what you focus on, you can.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of like you live and you learn. Like, I mean, I had a very similar experience with what you mentioned, like when it doesn't work out, but that's okay, and like you pivot and you move on, you find a new path. Like obviously, I mean, we could go down the rabbit hole, but when I left the lacrosse team, it was something very similar to that. Like it just didn't work out. Like it's not like I was present, like I made a decision, and like now it's time to move on. Like it's just, and I mean, like it's the same for you. Like I'm full confidence that like if your concussion had gone south or whatever, like God forbid, like you would have pivoted, like you would have moved on, like you would have been the best coach there ever was or whatever. You know what I mean? Like that's how you live like a life. That's how you live like a defined life and like a life with a mission. Yeah, absolutely. So to end the podcast, what we always do here on Connect with KT is we have a segment called Braveheart. And I'm sure you know what Bravehearts are in lacrosse when there's two people, two goalies, and you just go to war. So it's very high stakes. It's very intense. And basically the subject is I say something and you have to tell me what comes to your mind right away when I say it. Okay. So here we go. Redwoods Lacrosse Club.
Champions.
Rutgers University.
My home.
RJ Kaminsky.
Goofball.
Garrett Epple.
Ox.
Ryder Garnsey.
My man.
Rayo's Hollywood.
Goat Restaurant.
Facts. Katie DeFeo.
My best friend.
And the best defender in the Premier Lacrosse League.
I can't answer that question. I'm done answering those questions because
I was gonna ask you who the GOAT was, like who the best player ever was, but I just like that's impossible. Like you just
I've just gotta prepare, and then we gotta go play out there and find out who the best player is.
Those takes just like put you in a hole. Like it's just like they're never good for anyone.
No, it's and I've been asked it so many times now that I'm just like I'm tired of talking about it. I want to go out there and play and prove we could prove it on the field who's the best.
Hey man, let's go. All right, Jules Heningburg, thank you very much for coming on the podcast today. We really appreciated hearing your story. And where can the fans find you? To quote Mitchell Pokey, where can the fans find you?
They can find me at Jules Heningburg on Instagram and Twitter. And follow Mission Prime as well. If you've enjoyed our little conversation about that, I'm very excited about what the future holds with Mission Prime and what it can do for everyone.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jules.